Welcome to the Chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 8 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half, and you can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined by the best co-host in the game. You've seen him on the Tough Cover Pod. It's Mark Henry Jr. You can follow him on Twitter at MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how you doing today?
How could I not be doing great after that Week 1 performance from the Eagles? We're going to talk about it, but what an absolutely amazing way to start the football season.
Yeah, I almost forgot what it was like to have fun watching an NFL football game. So it was a refreshing experience. We're going to break it all down. We've got a great show lined up for you guys today. We're going to break down the Eagles, and then we're going to throw it around the NFL and talk about all the games on the Week 1 slate. But before we get to that, this podcast is live on Apple Podcasts, so please follow, rate, review. If you are watching live on Facebook or on Twitter, on YouTube, drop a comment. We'd love to interact with you guys as we go through the show. So, Mark, let's get into it. Eagles versus the Falcons. The Eagles come away with the huge win on the road. 3.5-point underdogs. They win 32-6. Where do you want to start? You want to start on the offense, the defense? What are you feeling like?
I feel like I guess it's hard to start anywhere but Jalen Hurts, and because that's the most important part of the game. And we've said it all season. The most important part of the season is finding out what Jalen Hurts is and finding out what he's going to be for the future. And I don't know how you could watch yesterday's game and not have a lot of optimism about that question mark. I mean, it was almost like the best possible game you could have hoped for out of Jalen Hurts in terms of his first game as the entrenched starter after an off season. I'm sure we'll get to the question marks about the opponent that we faced, and I have some feelings about that, but it's hard to look anywhere but Jalen Hurts to start it off.
Yeah, so Jalen Hurts is 27 of 35 for 264 yards, 3 touchdowns. He takes 1 sack, and he added 7 carries for 62 yards on the ground. ESPN credits him with a fumble. For the life of me, I can't remember that fumble. What, do you remember that? What did I just block that out?
Did he? I feel like they might have cut back, honestly, like late to the play. I think he fumbled and then ran and threw one away. That might be what that is. So there was like a weird snap that I kind of remember. In like the second or third quarter.
So it shows it credits Hurts with a fumble and Kelsey with a fumble, and it credits Hurts with 2 fumble recoveries. So botch snaps is what it's talking about here.
I think so. I would have to guess.
I totally did not remember him fumbling the ball. So that's poor. That's poor counting. That shouldn't count as a fumble. But yeah, I mean, Hurts had a really good game. If you told me that that's what he was going to do, I would have signed up for that all day. Now, it wasn't perfect. I mean, the warts are still there in terms of accuracy. You had that, I think it was the second drive where he dramatically underthrew one of the tight ends. I can't remember which one. Yeah, that's a touchdown if he puts that ball upfield. That slant to Devonta Smith is behind. It's not on target. It's still a catch, but there's some warts still there in terms of ball placement, bailing from the pocket. Hurts is at his best when he's under pressure, and he's at his worst when he feels like there's pressure but there's not, and he bails out of the back of the pocket. So I want to see him step up into that pocket and make a throw instead of just running at that first side of pressure. But all in all, he showed what he can do for the game. His intended air yards was 3.7 average intended air yards. The only other person under 5 in Week 1 was Andy Dalton at 4.2. So that's not company you want to keep necessarily. But it worked. And so, I'm not going to sit here and knock him for not pushing the ball downfield when he didn't need to. I think he's got the ability to do that when he does need to, but we're going to have to wait and see on that. When he did drive the ball downfield, his completion percentage above expectation was plus 9.1%, which was 5th best in the league. So he made the throws. He looked really good. Obviously things to work on, but really positive performance by Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other positive takeaways we can get to. I feel like the best way to do it is just kind of to go through the game. And you start out the game, and it didn't look pretty on that first drive defensively. I mean, it felt like, wow, Calvin Ridley, 3 catches. I think he had like 3 catches for 40 yards on that first drive. And it really felt like, oh man, this is kind of our nightmare. Like I kept saying, Calvin Ridley, Kyle Pitts, those are the key factors in if the Falcons can really, drop some points on our defense. And obviously, I think that ended up being the case. They didn't step up after that first drive. Kyle Pitts never stepped up for the entirety of the game. And that ended up being something that they must have – I don't know if they adjusted to that after the first drive. I don't know what happened that Calvin Ridley stopped getting targeted. Maybe it just has to do with the amount of pressure that the D-line was getting. But that was a scary first drive going down the field with Calvin Ridley getting those catches. And then obviously I think the game changed. One of the turning points of the game was Brandon Graham stepping up and nailing Mike Davis out of the backfield on first. I think it was 1st and 5 or 1st and 10 near the goal line. And Brandon Graham absolutely crushed Mike Davis. It was an absolute, right here, just an absolute bang. Like that got that defense pumped up, and you have to love how they played in the rest of that series to keep them to a field goal, and then they did it on the next drive. I mean, that's just incredible. That really took the air out of the Falcons stadium and out of the Falcons team in general to get down all the way to the field, move the ball easily against that defense, get all the way down, and then have to settle for 3 both times when you're like within the 5-yard line both times. I mean, that's just terrible. That takes the entire momentum of the game and shifts it. And that was a huge shift of momentum in the game by the defense.
Yeah. So the Falcons come out, they walk the ball down the field their first 2 drives. They had 146 yards on their first 2 drives. They had 114 yards the rest of the game. After the first quarter, the Falcons ran 1 play in Eagles territory in the final 3 quarters of the game. The first 2 drives, the Falcons had 13 carries for 86 yards rushing. The next 7 drives, they had 11 carries for 25 yards rushing. And what you saw, well, I won't tell you what you saw. What I saw, you can tell me if you saw the same thing. The Eagles came out. We've heard all offseason that Jonathan Gannon wants to be multiple in his defensive fronts. We saw Jannard Avery playing Sam, playing overhang linebacker in training camp. What I saw is the first 2 drives, he came out and he led with 3-down line sets, running 3-4, running 3-3-5. And the Falcons marched the ball right down the field, particularly on the ground. Now, the reason for that, people were, taking issue with the defensive line, but the defensive line's job is not to stop the run when you're in a 3-down front. Your defensive linemen are 2-gapping. They're occupying the offensive line so your linebackers can step up, fill gaps, and make plays. And what we saw is the Eagles just don't have the linebackers to do that. Eric Wilson was abysmal in this game. We'll get to him later. But the linebackers weren't making plays. And what I loved is that after those first 2 drives, you very rarely saw the defense in 3-down sets anymore. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Gannon made that adjustment and it completely changed the course of the game. So I don't know if you kind of noticed the same thing as you were watching, but that was one of my biggest takeaways early in the game is how Gannon adjusted on the fly and really – I mean, it shut the Falcons' offensive attack down.
Yeah, I can't say it any better than you just did. And I think that was a big thing for the coaching staff in general, not just Gannon defensively, but Sirianni and the play calling offensively. And it's something I'll talk about, but it seemed like going into drives, they almost had like objectives that they wanted to complete on a drive. Like the one drive, the second drive out, actually, it seemed like they were peppering the tight ends. Goddard got 2 catches. They had the one to Ertz that Hurts did underthrow. You're right. It could have been a touchdown. That it seemed like they were peppering the tight ends on that drive. The next drive, or a couple drives later, 4 catches for Devonta Smith on the one drive. Like it seemed like they were really trying to do certain things on certain drives. The first drive, I mean, that's like the most important like kind of example of this. The first play of the game is to Quez for 15 yards. You obviously get 15 yards added on due to a roughing a unsportsmanlike conduct on the Falcons hitting Quez out of bounds. So you get 30 yards on the first play of the game. You go right back to Quez. You get another 10 to 15 yards on that play. And then, that's the same play. They ran the same play back-to-back, got the same result. The Falcons finally adjust because they ran it a 3rd time, and they tackled him for 2 yards. But it seems like they had certain things that they wanted to accomplish on each drive. And I don't know if that's something they planned out before the game, obviously game scripting and scripting your plays. or if that's something that Sirianni kind of watched and saw how the defense reacted to things and said, this is the drive we want to get this guy involved. And I thought that was something I noticed throughout the game.
Yeah, I loved the opening drive script from Sirianni. He came out, that first drive, they were packaging run and pass plays, and they were letting Hurts make the call based on the box count. And, they played horizontal football, easy throws, stretching the defense horizontally like we talked about. They went up tempo, try to get the defense out of sorts. And then they cap it off doing exactly what, we talked about in the preview show. We said that you wanted to see them empty out the backfield, stretch them horizontally, which is exactly what they do. And they just execute that rub route beautifully. And perfect pass by Jalen Hurts for Devonta Smith's first career touchdown. And, I mean, that opening drive script I said was great. I wanted to see what we did once we're off of that script. And, I mean, once we were off that script, it didn't change. Like, the offense continued to hum. One thing I thought was really interesting that I didn't notice at the time, I realized it later, but Quez Watkins had 3 catches in this game. They were on the first 3 plays of the game. He was never targeted again, and he played a lot. I don't think that's necessarily a good or a bad thing. I just thought it was really interesting that like they fed the ball to Quez Watkins the first 3 plays, and then we never saw him with another catch.
Yeah, I think I'm done with both Quez and Rager as the punt returners, by the way. Seems like they're just way too much hesitation when you're getting the ball. They're like dancing for 5 seconds. They end up getting tackled 5 seconds later. That was just another a little side thing. But yeah, Quez he was out there a lot. I noticed him out there a lot. I was kind of expecting them to try to run something else to get him in space like they did on the first drive, but it didn't seem like he was a kind of something they focused on. I get that kind of game script changes when you go up, and I think we can't go much longer. I mean, there are obviously some other things in between that touchdown and then the next one that we had, but I mean, to end that half, there's a big play right there. I mean, Jalen Rager, a guy that I've doubted a ton, but it seems like that's a play that maybe they would have ran for Quez in the first quarter, and they ended up running it for Rager later on in the game. So it's nice to have multiple options of guys that you can run a play for to get in space. But I thought that, the biggest swing in the game and the most important moment of the game is going down the field with 1:50 left in this first half, being able to punch in a touchdown instead of just getting a field goal. And at that time, you go from it being 7-6 with 1:50 left to you get the ball, you have a chance to score, and you get the ball after halftime. That's just such a swing. Thank you to the black end zone, Atlanta. So we'll never know if that's actually a catch. And I think he probably got under it enough that they wouldn't have overturned it even in a normal end zone. But, I mean, yeah, just an absolute dart by Jalen here. I mean, and then a great catch by Dallas, who had a great catch to get them down the field. They ended up having to blow a timeout because he couldn't get out of bounds, but it was a good first down catch. And something I noticed on that drive and something I noticed throughout the game, and it was most noticeable on that drive because I think he rushed for 2 first downs. Jalen Hurts being a third down cheat code with his legs, and you being able to, if it's not there right away, he's able to get 4 or 5 yards anytime he wants, it seems like. So that is just something that we knew. Obviously, mobility is a pretty huge part of the Jalen Hurts package, but I mean, it shined through. And I expected it to with the Falcons' lack of team speed on defense, and that was evident. That was something I was kind of preaching before the game, that was going to be a factor in this game, and it was. But regardless, that seems like that's going to be a factor in every game that Jalen Hurts plays, and it's something to be excited about, and it's something that these teams with rushing quarterbacks have such an advantage on third down. I think that's the reason that I'm always so drawn to mobile quarterbacks is because when we play against them on third down, it's a nightmare. Think about having to play against Seattle and Russell Wilson on third down, and it's just such a nightmare to have to deal with. So it's nice to have that as opposed to going against it.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing, I saw, Miles Sanders and Kenny Gainwell both did really well in pass protection. I tweeted out a couple of clips of them picking up some blocks. That's huge. That allows you to do so many different things with your offense. It allows you to consistently release Ertz or Goddard on routes without having to let them chip. If you've got a running back you can trust in pass protection. I really liked what I saw from them. Sanders, he struggled as a runner early. I thought he left a lot of yardage on the field, but he picked it up as we went through the game. I thought he started to settle in. His expected rushing yards per attempt was negative 0.88, which was 7th worst in the NFL. I didn't think he was that bad, but he definitely, we saw some of that hesitation, some of that missing some reads. But overall, I thought he looked good. He had some catches, which is nice to see. Gainwell on the field instead of Boston Scott, who never got a snap. That kind of surprised me. Especially Gainwell seemed to be the guy in the 2-minute drill. And so that's a big step for a rookie 4th-round pick to be trusted in that situation. So I really like the 2-back approach they have with Sanders and Gainwell.
I like it a lot too, and it's something that I've hoped for all offseason. I think we've said multiple times here that I don't want to see Boston Scott. I've had enough of the Boston Scott experience. We know what the absolute peak of the Boston Scott experience is, and it's not enough to warrant playing him. So I was happy to see Gainwell. I would like to say that I don't know, I'm not even looking at the stats right in front of me, but it felt like we could have played Miles Sanders a little bit more. Like maybe a little less Gainwell, a little more Miles Sanders. And I'm not even necessarily the hugest Miles Sanders guy. But it felt like, maybe a couple more snaps here and there. But I thought that there was actually like one play where I noticed, I think it was the 4th and 4 play that we weren't able to convert anything. Brandon Brooks ended up missing a block. Grady Jarrett forced Hurts out of the pocket. He ended up just throwing it up instead of going out of bounds. But Miles Sanders was wide open across the middle on that play. That would have been a nice little thing to see Miles Sanders make a play in the passing game. Obviously, he had those issues with drops and last season, and people were saying that as well in training camp. So that would have been nice to see him make a big play like that. But obviously, I think that shows that the play design was there. The play call was there. It also, Goddard was pretty open on the play too, if you go back and watch. But so it shows that on the 4th downs, and this goes for another 4th down later in the game. I'll just talk about it now. When it was 4th and 2, and they ran it up the middle, I believe, to Gainwell. Hurts and Gainwell kind of messed up the handoff. And I really think that if they didn't do that, it would have been a 1st down easily. But it seemed like they couldn't get that handoff clean, and it forced Gainwell to hesitate. And that ended up, those 4th downs didn't go our way. But I think both 4th downs, the play call and the play design was correct. It's just, shit happens.
Yeah, I loved the aggressiveness on, even though it didn't work out on both the 4th downs, on the 2-point conversion after the penalty on the extra point. Like, I love that aggressiveness. I thought the play calls were fine. The execution didn't work out. And that's why a lot of teams don't go for it. But I like to see Sirianni embracing the analytics there. That's one of the things I loved the most about Doug Peterson. And I was afraid that we would take a step back there. So I loved seeing that aggression early.
Yeah, we were even more aggressive, it felt like, with Sirianni than at least we were last year with Doug. So that was nice to see. But you touched on it there, the 2-point conversion, and I can't emphasize enough how happy that made me. I stress about it all the time, and it's funny. I had a long conversation. I was actually arguing with people on Twitter the night before because Notre Dame was playing a game. They went up 7, and the argument always is, you go up 7, do you kick the extra point to go up 8? Or do you take the 2-point conversion to go up 9? I am of the opinion that 100% of the time, no matter what the situation, you take the 2-point conversion to go up 9 because the chance of it being a 2-possession game is way farther. It way outweighs the risk of it only being a 7-point game and you only being up a touchdown because the percentage chance that you're going to give up the 2-point conversion is better than not. So I can't stand when people kick the extra point to go up 8. So I was a little annoyed when they sent the kicker out there at first to take the extra point, but as soon as they got that penalty, I started screaming, they better go for 2 here, and they did it, and that made me very happy. I hope that that's something Sirianni sees, even not just with the penalty. I hope that's something he notices with that worked out so well that maybe next time you go up 7 in a game, you go for 2. That's just something small that I personally care about as someone who plays Madden and cares about the go for it situations and the timeout situations more than anything with coaching almost.
Yeah, the analytics would tell you that there's like a 4.7% edge favoring going for 2 in that situation because, when you look at your likelihood of converting a 2-point conversion versus kicking the extra point and then your opponent, converting a 2-point conversion, it comes down to just a little under a 5% edge. And I'm with you. I'm always going for 2 in that situation. So
I have another. Before we move on, I have another situation to throw at you because we touched on it. 4th and 4 on 36, up 7-6. What do you do there?
Which 36?
On the Falcons 36, when we went for 4th and 4 and we weren't able to get it, would you have went for it, or you take the extra, or you take the field goal there?
No, I loved going for it there.
I agree.
Your offense moved the ball down the field, first possession. You were driving again. You hadn't shown at that point that you could stop Atlanta. Now, if this is later in the game and it's 7-6 in the fourth quarter, I think it changes the scenario. But early in the game, where both teams are seeming to move the ball at will, I was solidly in favor of going for it there.
Agreed, for sure.
So I think early in the game, obviously everything worked for the Falcons. We weren't getting pressure on Matt Ryan. We couldn't stop the run. I feel like once we switched into those 4-down sets, it allowed your pass rushers to tee off on one gap. It allowed them to penetrate. That gets pressure on Matt Ryan. That helps stop the run. The interior pass rush in this game was fierce once we got out of that first quarter. Once the run game kind of faded away, you really saw Fletcher Cox, and I know his stats didn't go off, but Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, you saw these guys just living in the backfield. And so that was great to see. Now, you're not going to face the Falcons' interior defense or offensive line every week. You probably won't face an interior offensive line that bad again until we play the Giants. But it's good to see them being able to take over a game if they need to.
No, yeah, for sure. Javon Hargrave, I mean, we got to see his new celebration. I don't know if that's an old celebration. We didn't get to see it many times in the past. If it was, we got to see that celebration after a couple sacks and big plays. I'd love to see that for the rest of the year. That means he's making plays. So the interior defensive line was absolutely huge, and that was something we touched on before the game. Yeah, there it is. That was something we touched on before the game. In general, the offensive line and the defensive line, those were always going to be the massive advantages the Eagles held in that game. And it was as evident as I've ever seen a trenches advantage in an NFL game, I feel like. Like, we were just mauling them off of the offensive line, and then we were just getting to the quarterback at will as soon as after those first two drives. So everything you could have hoped for out of the offensive and defensive line, they proved that both of those guys are in the conversation, or both of those units, I should say, are in the conversation as top 5 offensive line units and top 5 defensive line units in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, obviously the Eagles still have issues at linebacker. I tried to tell people this offseason that we're excited about the Eric Wilson signing, that Eric Wilson is not that good of a player. There's a reason that he was available. There's a reason he signed a 1-year deal. And this is the reason. I mean, this is Eric Wilson trying to take on 36-year-old Matt Ryan and just totally getting juked out of his shorts in the open field. And I don't know how casual of a football fan some of our viewers may be, but Matt Ryan is not an athletic quarterback. This is Eric Wilson on the same drive on a 3rd and 9 play where the Falcons are just giving it up, running the ball, and he makes a weak arm tackle, misses it, gives up the first down. And so linebacker play is still very much something to watch for, still very much a weakness for this team.
Yeah, I didn't notice too many times where Alex Singleton popped off the screen either, which was something I was hoping to see like he did in the preseason. He wasn't jumping off the screen, getting to the ball in the same way. So, yeah, linebacker is definitely a concern, but it obviously didn't affect us too much, but it's definitely something going forward that if Eric Wilson can't contain Matt Ryan when we're going against, what if Trey Lance plays some snaps next week and is running around? And there's a lot of quarterbacks that could give us some trouble running around if Eric Wilson can't handle Matt Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, anything else you want to touch on with the Eagles before we move on to just kind of around the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard just not to say, like, I think we were both on the higher end of optimism around Eagles podcast, NFL podcast in general on the Eagles. I think we were both, you had them winning 8-9 games. I had them winning 8-9 games. And we both I think we both were a little, I don't know. The notion that this team could have won 4 games always was crazy to me. I always thought that this team had really like a 6-win floor, maybe even a 7-win floor. So I think that it's hard not to feel kind of vindicated already. I know the answer to that is everyone on Twitter yelling at me when I'm kind of bragging about the win yesterday. The Falcons are terrible. The Falcons are so bad. ESPN had 10 experts pick the game. They all picked the Falcons. The Falcons were a 3.5-point underdog. The Falcons had more money coming in on them in Vegas than the Eagles did as a 3.5-point favorite. This was not like a team that went 1-15 last year. I know that they had a bad year. They won 5 games, whatever it was. this is not like they're an NFL team. They're not, it wasn't the New York Jets that we beat 32-6. And even if they are a bad team, we beat them 32-6. Like everything that we could have hoped for, I think was even better and exceeded expectations almost yesterday. Like it's hard. I was as optimistic as anyone, and they were better than I could have ever hoped. So it's just like, it's crazy.
I mean, there's been, even if the Falcons are a bad team, how long has it been since the Eagles have blown out a bad team that they should have beat? And so, I mean, in Nick Sirianni's first start, he looked in full command. Jonathan Gannon made adjustments. I mean, how refreshing is it to watch a guy make an adjustment on defense? Jim Schwartz would never. Jalen Hurts looked good. I mean, there's a lot to walk away from the game and be happy about. I mean, there's some things we need to clean up. The penalties were atrocious, and they've got to clean that up. And some other things, but overall, I couldn't be more happy with a week 1 performance, especially considering how little the first team played in the offseason.
No, absolutely. I mean, we barely talked about Devonta Smith, but that's, I mean, he obviously, we touched on the touchdown. He was just, he was everything you could have hoped for right away. Like, I think I said, I caught myself I was re-listening to Chalk Talk from last week, the preview, and I kind of caught myself because I was talking about Devonta Smith like he was this established number 1 receiver, like he was the number 1 pass target. We needed a number 2 to step up behind him. And I said on the preview, I was like, oh, maybe I'm being presumptive, maybe Devonta Smith won't step in right away and be ready to take that number 1 spot. But he absolutely was, and he absolutely was the focus of our passing offense. And he just looked like every bit of what I expected him to look. The size didn't look concerning to me at all. He was able to get separation at ease, it seemed like. So that's just something else. That's obviously one of the more important things to watch this season because he's one of our building blocks going forward, in my opinion. So that's another absolute positive in yesterday's game.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's kick it back a couple of days, dial it back to Thursday night. The NFL opener, Dallas travels to Tampa Bay, and we saw some fireworks, but ultimately the Buccaneers walk out with a 31-29 win. What did you take away from this game?
My takeaway is that a lot of people are going to take that the Cowboys, they hung with the Bucs. They're really good. It's the same problem. They can't cover. The defense is still a massive problem, and especially their pass defense. So that's going to be something to watch with the Cowboys going forward. We had no doubts about their offense. We had no doubts about their passing offense. Their weapons are absolutely incredible. Although I will say Zeke didn't look great, so that's a point for you. You're very low on Zeke. You think he's going to regress, and it looked like it in game 1. And Michael Gallup's also hurt, so that could definitely, you're able to focus more on Cooper and Lamb without Gallup in the game. So that could be important going forward. But the main takeaway, the Cowboys defense still stinks. The Bucs sleptwalked through the second half of that game and still won. You had to get some Tom Brady heroics at the end of the game, but I'm happy, maximum pain for Cowboys fans.
Yeah. I mean, they combined for 108 passes, 782 yards and 7 touchdowns. That's the most combined passing in an NFL game. I think it was since 2010. I can't remember now. You would not have had me guessing that the quarterback matchup that would provide that would be 44-year-old Tom Brady against Dak Prescott, who's getting his shoulder looked at by pitching specialists. Like, that's not what I would have expected the opener to be. I mean, honestly, the Buccaneers are fortunate that Greg Zuerlein forgot how to kick, or they would have lost that game. You can't turn the ball over 4 times and win a game, except they did, because the Cowboys weren't able to make them pay. They had to settle for field goals, chip shot field goals that Zuerlein then missed. And so, like you said, the offense for the Cowboys did what was expected of them, but the defense has to play better on a snap-to-snap basis. You can't rely on those turnovers. I mean, it was a punch-out on Godwin in the red zone. It was the balls deflecting off a running back's hands on a screen pass. It was, a running back fumble. And then I guess the Tom Brady Hail Mary right before halftime, that one doesn't really count. But so 3 turnovers that potentially take points off the board, but you can't rely on that to get stops. They got to be better on a snap-to-snap basis. And I just don't know that they have the juice to do that. I didn't think Micah Parsons looked good. I didn't expect him to look good. I mean, he hasn't played a football game in almost 2 years. And so it's going to take some adjusting, but I would say he was a little worse than I would have expected. I don't think that says anything about how he's going to be playing in 6 weeks. But, I'm all for Dallas losing, even if it means Tom Brady has to win. So I had a lot of fun watching that game. It was a great opener.
Yeah, and I will just say that, you know, Tampa begs to differ on not being able to win with 3 turnovers. Tom Brady, no one likes to talk about it because they won the Super Bowl. Tom Brady threw for 3 picks against the Saints in the divisional round and then threw for 3 picks against the Packers in the conference championship. No one likes to talk about it, but the Packers and the Saints had uber chances to beat the Buccaneers last year in the playoffs and to get to the Super Bowl. So it's crazy that Brady gets away with some of the stuff he gets away with. But obviously he's the best because of at the end of that game with a minute 30 left, a minute 20 left, you knew it was too much time. You knew the Bucs were going to get down the field and get a field goal. It was inevitable.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's move on. Jacksonville at the Houston Texans. Man, a really bad look for Urban Meyer in his start with the with the Jaguars. The Texans are the only team in that division to come away with a Week 1 win. And their defense matched their interception total for the entire 2020 season in Week 1 with 3 interceptions of Trevor Lawrence. What'd you see in this game?
Yeah, I mean, this was just from Jump Street. The Jaguars could not protect Trevor. The Jaguars could not defend the run whatsoever. I mean, it was really pathetic. It was a pathetic performance, pathetic showing for Urban Meyer, clearly not getting his guys ready. I guess I underestimated how bad that O-line is and how bad that defense is. I thought that they made a couple additions here and there, and I thought Trevor Lawrence would have an Andrew Luck type kind of impact, the way that Luck had an impact on the Colts. Didn't seem to be the case. I don't think Trevor looked that bad when he had a clean pocket. But besides that, there's not a lot of positives to take away here.
Yeah, I mean, it did not surprise me at all that Urban Meyer's team didn't look like it have a clue what it was doing. They had too many. They were flagged for too many men in the huddle. They had 2 illegal formations. They burned 2 timeouts in the first quarter to avoid delay of games. None of that surprises me. I thought Urban Meyer was a terrible hire. I think he'll be fired by the end of the year. I don't expect him to last here. And I think they're wasting a year of Trevor Lawrence's development with him at the helm. And that's it. Lawrence throws the 3 picks. A lot of people are going to overreact to the box score. If you turn it on, if you watch, I don't think he was that bad. I mean, he's testing the waters. He's seeing what he can do. It kind of goes back to the Peyton Manning rookie season, throwing all those interceptions. He's seeing what he can get away with. And I fully expect Lawrence to steadily improve throughout the year. But I told people he's not going to come in and revolutionize the Jags. It's a bad team. It's a bad coach. And although he is a generational talent, and I don't throw that around lightly, there's some holes in his game. He wasn't asked to throw the ball downfield much in college. It was a lot of screen type of things that you just can't do constantly in the NFL. So he's got some growth to do. I'm fully confident he'll grow, though.
Yeah, he might have some Jameis type numbers from a couple of years ago if he keeps going 330 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 picks every game. That's like it's on pace for 51 touchdowns, 51 picks, however many yards. So that'd be funny.
Would be. All right. So the next game we've got the Chargers at Washington taking on the football team. Big thing coming out of this game is Ryan Fitzpatrick with a hip injury I've never heard of. He's going to IR now. So Taylor Heineke gets to play. Heineke goes 11 of 15 for 122 yards and a touchdown, outdueled by Justin Herbert as the Chargers overcome a fumble out of the end zone for a touchback and a red zone interception, and they end up winning the game 20-16. What'd you see in this one?
Well, you know what? They overcame it and they won the game, but as someone who had Chargers team total over 21.5, with a red zone pick, a red zone fumble, 2 field goals in the red zone, and also at the end of the game, you have the ball 20-16 with like 2 or 3 minutes left, and they ended up getting a first down and then kneeing it out instead of taking a field goal or scoring a touchdown. Such a frustrating loss, a bad beat. But I had a lot of takeaways from this game. This is one of the games that I was kind of focused on the most. Maybe that's because Washington's in the division. Maybe it's because I had a bet on it. But I actually kind of walked away a little bit more impressed with Washington and maybe a little bit less impressed with the Chargers. I think that Washington is a much scarier team with Taylor Heineke at quarterback going forward than they are with Ryan Fitzpatrick. I've said many times, and I think you agreed with me a little bit, Ryan Fitzpatrick is not the game-managing type of quarterback that Washington needs. He's going to turn the ball over a lot. We obviously didn't get a chance to see it. He didn't play for long enough. But I think Taylor Heineke is a guy who gives you that. He's going to manage the game. I think he was like 11 for 15, 130 yards or whatever it was. And he's also going to give you some mobility at a big first down run. So obviously there's some upside there too, because we don't know what he is yet. Maybe he can even improve and step into a role even greater than a game manager with some mobility. But I think that's what he is at the very least, which is something I'd rather with that Washington football team than Ryan Fitzpatrick trying to prove he's still got it and whatever's going on there. So I actually think that Heineke is going to improve that offense. So I think going forward, I think Washington's just as good as we thought they were before this game. That defense stepping up in the red zone, the way they did, 2 field goals, a pick, a fumble. And the fumble, by the way, I think it was an incomplete pass. Another complaint. Do you have it right here? Is this the fumble?
Yeah, this is absolutely an incomplete pass.
That's an incomplete pass. I actually couldn't believe it.
Yeah, and they reviewed it and determined that was a fumble, which blows my mind. You don't fumble the ball 20 yards forward. And on the slow-mo replay, you can clearly see that his hand's moving forward. I don't understand that call at all, but it is what it is. And they survived that. Washington, we talked about their defense a lot, but they showed some holes in this game. They could not get off the field on third downs. The Chargers converted 14 of 18 third downs, and so that Washington defense is definitely going to have to step up. I don't know if Taylor Heineke is going to be what the football team does or if they're going to make a move. A lot of people have connected Cam Newton to Ron Rivera. I don't know that they make that move, though, because, Ron Rivera has been very making passionate pleas about vaccinations, and we know Cam Newton is not vaccinated. And Ron Rivera is a high-risk person, and so no one would ever say that made an impact in the decision, but I'm not sure that we see that happen for that reason. So I'm interested to see what they do at quarterback, if they decide to make a move or not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on record saying I think Cam's done. So I think even if they bring in Cam, maybe you do that as a backup to Heineke. I think that's fine. I think Kyle Allen's a fine backup, though, too. So I think they're fine rolling with Heineke and Allen. They're both game manager type guys. And obviously Heineke has the ability to hopefully kind of propel him past that game manager role. I don't care if he propels him past there, but they're hoping that. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, though. The third down thing, I think you can just chalk that up to Justin Herbert being a stud. And I actually think that a couple of those third downs that they didn't get were because of drops. I don't know what the drops numbers were and who had as many as they did. It felt like every time I was watching that game, Herbert was throwing one right on the money that either a defender was getting like a pinky on and barely deflecting or was getting dropped. And Herbert was making some crazy throws, getting away from some pressure. But the one thing he didn't have to deal with was pressure from his blindside because Rashawn Slater, I saw he was getting rave reviews. Like the Chargers even I think just put out like a video with all of his crazy blocks from the game and spliced with all the tweets that people were sending out about him. So people are really excited about that pick. So it looks like maybe he was the tackle that Cincinnati should have taken instead of Penei Sewell, which we kind of discussed on Friday.
Although, well, we'll get to Sewell here in a few minutes. But, yeah, let's keep moving down the list here, get through some more games. We've got Seattle Seahawks traveling to Indianapolis to take on the Colts. Russell Wilson has a perfect passer rating in the first half, and the Seahawks win a game 28-16. Carson Wentz with the most Carson Wentz stat line ever, throws a couple touchdowns, gets sacked 3 times, hit 10 times, fumbles, loses a fumble. I saw Colts fans blaming the offensive line, which just sounds a whole lot like what Eagles fans did last year when they were in denial about Carson Wentz. But good news for the Colts, they get an easy one next week. They just have to face Aaron Donald. So we'll see how that goes for them. Anything for you on this game?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like every offensive line Carson Wentz plays for immediately becomes a massive problem and something that the fans can complain about. I don't know what the common denominator is. Maybe someone out there can help me out and connect the dots. But, I don't think that they're completely wrong. The offensive line does have some problems, which we've pointed out all offseason. And the receiver core is even worse. So the receiving core maybe even is worse than the offensive line, which obviously no one's getting separation. But Carson Wentz is holding on to the ball for too long. Anyone who watched that game yesterday can't tell me that Carson Wentz wasn't holding on to the ball too long, taking unnecessary hits, trying to make too much happen. And, he was dinking and dunking up a storm, not taking any shots downfield. He got one guy open downfield, and he, missed the throw by 10 yards. So Carson Wentz is exactly who he was last year, in honesty, in my opinion. And they lost the game in part due to that, and in part just due because that Seattle offense is going to be awesome this year. And the Seattle money line was Seattle minus 2.5 and Seattle team total over 24.5 were my best bets. Both hit pretty easily. So this was a game I had my eye on all game, and it was fun watching Carson Wentz just not being able to avoid pressure and not have it be for the Eagles.
Yeah, absolutely. And from one quarterback that got sacked a bunch to another one, the New York Jets at the Carolina Panthers, Zach Wilson gets sacked 6 times, and Mekhi Becton leaves the game with what was feared to be an ACL injury, but it turned out to be an MCL sprain. And so his year won't be done, but he is going to be out. And the Jets are going to have to find a way to keep Zach Wilson upright. The Sam Darnold revenge game. It's amazing how much a difference not playing for Adam Gase makes for quarterbacks. I don't think Darnold is some great quarterback, but easily one of his better performances in his first game in Carolina.
I didn't even think he looked that good, to be honest. From my takeaway from the game, I thought this game set football back 10 years. Neither team could move the ball for most of the first half at least. So I think that Darnold's numbers ended up looking better than how he actually played. Robbie Anderson made a big play too, so that helped his numbers out a lot. But I think that the Jets are not a good football team. Is the main takeaway from that. Obviously, the offensive line is going to be even more of a problem. They had a ton of injuries on the defense in training camp and preseason that really hurt them. And their defense, I guess, played pretty well in terms of, I don't know, what was the final score in that game?
It was, I just texted off. Hold on.
No problem.
I'm managing way too many tabs over here. 19-14.
Yeah,
Darnold was 24-35 for 279 and a touchdown.
Yeah, that's better than it looked, in my opinion. But, yeah, he was fine. The Jets are bad. That's kind of my takeaway.
Yeah. So then to our first overtime game of the year, which was almost our first tie game of the year, as nobody wanted to score in overtime. You got the Cincinnati Bengals playing host and spoiler to the Minnesota Vikings. They get the 27-24 win. And my question coming out of this game is, do we see a physical altercation on the sideline between Kirk Cousins and Mike Zimmer this year?
Is it Mike Zimmer or is it Justin Jefferson? He might go and fight him too. Adam Thielen gets 2 touchdowns, gets all the targets. Justin Jefferson might fight him too.
I know Zimmer has been on Cousins publicly throughout the preseason and training camp. At halftime, when he's headed into the locker room, they asked him, and he specifically said Cousins is holding on to the ball too long. Just feels like this is going to bubble over. And Zimmer's actually absolutely right. Cousins is not – he's not a great quarterback. He's way overpaid, and this is going to be his last year in Minnesota. They're not going to pay him $45 million next year. But I think this could get ugly for the Vikings this season.
They're going to bench him for Mond eventually, for sure. I don't think Kellen Mond looked great in the preseason, or else they might have done it already. But I think that eventually that will be Kellen Mond's job. You're right. Zimmer definitely. The vaccination stuff, too. He's he can't stand that Cousins isn't vaccinated. It's a pretty funny dynamic there.
Mond isn't either, though, so it's not like he has that up on Cousins. So
yeah, no, that's true. But Kirk Cousins, he turtles it's crazy. He'll have a defender 3 steps away, and instead of throwing the ball away or trying to make a throw or trying to move in the pocket, he just turtles. He just takes the sack. He gives himself up way too early. And it was something that I really noticed towards the end of last year, and it was something that happened an absolute ton in the first game. And it's going to happen a lot next week when they play Arizona with Chandler Jones, who had 5 sacks. You have J.J. Watt on the other side. So that's a pass rush that's going to give them trouble again next week.
Yeah, so speaking of them, you got Arizona, Tennessee, and the Cardinals fancy themselves contenders. They pay DeAndre Hopkins. They go sign J.J. Watt, and then Chandler Jones is like, hey, I'd like some more money too, and they say no. Well, maybe you should give it to him. Chandler Jones gets 5 sacks. And the Cardinals just destroy the Titans. They looked awful. Kyler Murray plays great. Christian Kirk and Rondell Moore both had good games, which is a really good sign because you wondered who's going to step up next to DeAndre Hopkins. Derrick Henry, and we've talked about the workload, the insane workload he's had the last 2 years. He was held to 58 yards on 17 carries. Now, his offensive line did him no favors, but it is definitely something to keep an eye on with him as this season progresses.
Yeah, as someone who has shares of Derrick Henry in fantasy, I am nervous because that offensive line looked like a serious problem. Taylor Lewan had to issue like a public apology to Titans fans. I don't know if you saw that. He does like a Barstool podcast, so it's like he has all these people yelling at him like, stop podcasting and focus on blocking because Chandler Jones kept beating him around the edge. But so that was pretty funny. But yeah, that Titans O-line is a problem. Yeah,
absolutely. And they are definitely missing their departed offensive coordinator.
For sure.
You could just see, and their coach called out Julio Jones after the game too for some stuff. So that's another one that, you don't want to overreact to week 1, but I could see that turning into an ugly situation. They fancied themselves contenders. They made the win now move to go get Julio, and the early returns don't look good.
Yeah, I was a defender of that move, and it certainly didn't look great in week 1. This is a game I expected Tennessee to win. So yeah, it was really surprising to me. Maybe the most surprising result from week 1, maybe besides the Eagles, that they got absolutely killed. Same with the Packers. That's another surprising result that we'll get to. But those were the 3 big surprises of week 1, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we've got 7 games left. Let's roll through these. San Francisco at Detroit. San Francisco showed how dominant they can be for 3 quarters. And then they almost blew a 28-point lead in the last 6 minutes in a meltdown that would have made the Super Bowl 51 Kyle Shanahan-led Falcons proud. It's also a move that would have made the Super Bowl 54 Kyle Shanahan-led 49ers proud, which leads you to wonder, what is it about Kyle Shanahan and these late leads?
Yeah, I'm a Kyle Shanahan guy. I think he's a great coach. I think everyone thinks he's a great coach, but man, it's crazy that these leads that he gives up. It really is wild. And that was one of those games where it was like, oh, okay, cute little comeback, fantasy garbage time. And then they get another touchdown. And then they get a fumble from San Fran on the first down that would have ended the game, fumbles the ball. And Detroit gets the ball with down 8 with like a minute and a half left with a chance to tie the game. And it's like, wait a second, is this like, it's one of those games you just put it away. They were up, whatever, they were up 38-10, 37-10. And it's like, oh, that game's over. I'm going to stop thinking about that. And it became a real game, which was absolutely crazy. But yeah, I don't know what to take away. I have no idea how to value San Fran going into next week, obviously playing against the Eagles. So that's obviously going to be something we talk about more. And they did lose some pieces. They did lose Raheem Mostert in this game. They lost Jason Verrett at corner, both of those pretty serious injuries. And Brandon Ayuk, you might see him on the side of a milk carton after that week 1 performance. I guess they didn't play him. I don't know if there's some, non-football related thing. I've seen some buzz on Twitter about maybe some character issues. But what the beat reporters were saying was just that he had a bad camp, and some of the no-name receivers really outperformed him, and this was Kyle Shanahan's way of sending a message. Trey Sermon was also an inactive third-round pick running back that people expected to get work right away. Weird decisions from Kyle Shanahan to not use Ayuk or Sermon, and then obviously Mostert gets hurt, and you have Sermon inactive, so you're only dressing 2 running backs after your starting running back gets hurt. Didn't end up affecting them, obviously, but just weird.
Yeah, I don't know who those no-name receivers were that were better, because their number 2 receiver in the game had 2 catches for 23 yards. So maybe put him back on the field. And the Lions also lose Jeffrey Okudah, tore his Achilles, and he's out for the year, which is devastating for a guy who was drafted so highly and had such a poor rookie year last year and was looking for that bounce back. And that's just an incredibly tough injury to come off of. And so definitely hope that he's able to recover from that and come back next season.
I was not a fan of that pick at all, personally, for the Lions taking Okudah that high. I thought that was a massive reach. And it didn't look great last year. Like you said, he did need to take a step this year. And for them not to even get a chance to develop that this year, that pick is looking worse and worse, obviously out of their control. But you mentioned Sewell earlier. I didn't get a chance to, I didn't hear anything about Sewell. Did he give up the blindside
Oh no,
hitting on golf, or was he pretty good?
No, so Sewell got moved to left tackle when who's their left tackle? Decker?
Yeah, Taylor Decker.
Yeah. When Decker got hurt, they moved Sewell to left tackle, and he played really well at left tackle. You could tell a huge difference moving him from right tackle to left tackle. So interested to see what they do now. If they're going to leave him out there, I'm not sure what Decker's injury is or a timeline on that. But yeah, Sewell played really well at left tackle.
They also announced before the game that Jamal Williams was going to get the lion's share of the work at running back, and he was going to be the starter. And then DeAndre Swift got like 90% of the snaps. I guess just take everything the Lions and the 49ers say with a grain of salt going forward for fantasy football purposes out there and for gambling purposes.
Yeah. Okay, a big shocker to me here was Pittsburgh upsetting Buffalo at Buffalo. The Pittsburgh defense and special teams really shined in this game. 17 of the Steelers' 20 unanswered points were directly off of turnovers or a blocked punt. And so the defense, special teams comes through for the Steelers, not necessarily the offense, not necessarily sustainable, but that's a huge week one win for a team that I've really doubted.
I took the over in this game. This was the last pick I added to my card. Didn't end up coming even close. It was like 10-3 at halftime. And that's just crazy, especially the first play of the game. The Bills returned the kick almost for a touchdown all the way to the Steelers' 10-yard line. You thought, wow, what a start for the Bills, what a start for the over. Didn't turn out that way. That was one of those games that I was at a sports book watching all of the games at 1 o'clock. So obviously nine huge TVs going on around me. That's one of those games that kind of just got lost in the shuffle. Like, it never felt like either team was advancing past the 50. Like, the defense was really just shutting each other down. And from what I saw, Ben Roethlisberger, that offensive line, Najee Harris, the running game, did not look good. Like, the Steelers' offense did not look good, and it shows in the box score too. But it was not impressive for most of the game. But what you noticed throughout the game was those weapons are absolutely incredible. I mean, they have 3 receivers that are probably all top 30 receivers in the NFL. Maybe none of them are top 20, which is maybe even the craziest part of it. Like Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Juju, you could argue like their value in the league and in importance to that team is. You could change it each game. Like they're all kind of interchangeable in terms of who's the 1, 2, number 3, but they all stepped up and made plays when they had to in that game, especially Deontay Johnson. And that was the most impressive part of the offense because I did not think Roethlisberger looked good. The offensive line did not give him any time and they couldn't run the ball.
And Josh Allen regression watch 2021. His downfield accuracy was bad. He was 1 of 8 on passes over 20 yards. He was 3 of 12 on passes over 15 yards. So, again, it's one game. Allen was phenomenal last year. I expected a little bit of regression. I think he'll smooth out as well, but something to keep an eye on in Buffalo.
Yeah, I have a buddy who was very positive that Josh Allen was going to have a bad year this year and Buffalo was not going to make the playoffs, and I thought he was kind of crazy. I didn't see it coming at all, and maybe he saw it coming. It didn't look good game 1. Steelers have a really good defense, obviously. We'll see what Josh Allen has to do going forward. Big game next week. Obviously, it's only week 2. Bills at Dolphins. I'll be really interested to see how that game plays out. The Dolphins look good in week 1, especially that defense. So, how will Josh Allen, how will the Bills offense look against another good defense?
Yeah. And so then we've got what we called the game of the week, Cleveland at Kansas City. And it didn't fail to disappoint. Cleveland entered the game 1-20 in opening day game since the franchise moved back to Cleveland. They had a double-digit lead at halftime, but they couldn't come out with the win. They are now 1-21 in week 1 games. So never want to be a Browns fan in week 1. Odell Beckham Jr. didn't play. So that's something to keep an eye on as he kind of comes back from that ACL injury. It was up in the air if he was going to play, how quickly he'll come back and how productive he'll be when he does. But, I saw a lot of people saying the Browns choked in this game. I don't even know if I'd call it that. When you're playing against an offense as potent as the Chiefs, they're going to get their points. At the end of the day, I'm not a big fan of moral victories, but for the Cleveland to play the way they did, I'm feeling good about that game if I'm a Browns fan.
I 100% agree. I picked the Browns to go to the Super Bowl, and after that game, I'm feeling better than ever about that pick. I mean, especially without Odell, you have to imagine that would help them as well. So, I think it comes down to this game's takeaway is pretty simple. Patrick Mahomes is pretty good. Like that guy's pretty good. I don't know if you saw his September stats in his NFL career. He's like 9-0, averaging 337 yards. He has 35 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. It is unbelievable how good Patrick Mahomes is, especially to start off seasons when he has all his guys healthy and he has his offensive line intact. And after an all season to prepare, I mean, Patrick Mahomes is just on another planet than any other quarterback in football, in my opinion, and that was evidenced in this game. But Cleveland had the perfect strategy. You kept him off the field in the first half. You ran the football. I mean, you get up 22-10. You know you can't have a mess up on a punt where you give the ball back on the 10. You can't have a Nick Chubb fumble when he's about to score. Those two plays, you can't have multiple miscues and 2 mess ups like that against Patrick Mahomes. It's just you have to play a near perfect game to beat Patrick Mahomes.
Well, speaking of near perfect games, Green Bay plays New Orleans, and Jameis Winston turns in pretty near perfect game. LASIK Jameis. If I was a LASIK surgeon in the New Orleans area, I'd get on that ad campaign. I would get Jameis Winston to endorse LASIK surgery. I don't know that I was very low on the Saints. Did not expect that at all, and I was pretty high on the Packers. So, is it time to panic in Green Bay?
I don't know. I have no idea what to take away from this game because even when the Saints went up like 14-3, I still kept expecting the Packers to bounce back and put up a fight, and it just never happened. That team looked like it had absolutely no fight in them. It looked like they went into the game knowing they were going to lose. Like Aaron Rodgers even seemed like a little lackadaisical after the first couple drives. Like I don't know. There's definitely some reason to be concerned just from watching the game. That roster's still really good in Green Bay, so I'd be surprised to see them not bounce back in the next couple of weeks. Now, the bigger question mark is the Saints. I think this just shows Sean Payton is just an absolute mastermind. I mean, maybe I should have never doubted Sean Payton. Maybe he just, no matter what, Sean Payton is going to win 10 games, and that's just that's that. Maybe that's just what it is, but. Yeah, I don't know how much of this is LASIK Jameis. I don't know how much of this is the Saints defense, which looked absolutely phenomenal, or how much of this is just Sean Payton being a genius.
They do lose a big piece as Marshawn Lattimore gets injured. He's going to need thumb surgery now, which they just announced his contract extension before the game. So the Saints definitely lead the league in signing guys to contracts, and then they go straight to surgery. But, I don't think it's time to panic in Green Bay. They looked sharp in the summer. And I wouldn't bet against Rodgers. I think it's more a byproduct of the O-line shuffling. And, they had 2 rookies playing. They had a left guard playing left tackle because their left tackle's hurt. Now, I think it could get ugly because there's obviously grievances in that locker room and front office. But winning cures all, and if they can smooth out that offensive line, I expect them to rebound.
I agree, for sure.
So moving on, Denver Broncos at the New York Giants. And I have a public apology to make to Teddy Bridgewater. I stated on our preview show that the Broncos had the better everything except quarterback. And I would like to publicly apologize to Teddy Bridgewater, to his family, to his fans, to Broncos fans.
To me.
To you. And as my penance, I will no longer refer to him as Teddy Two Gloves because Teddy Bridgewater, he played great. And the Giants' offense is just an embarrassment. I mean, Daniel Jones fumbled again. People keep saying, if Daniel Jones will quit, fumbling the ball, he could be a pretty good quarterback. Yeah, most quarterbacks could be pretty good quarterbacks if they stopped giving the ball to the other team for no reason. But Daniel Jones shows no sign of it. Saquon Barkley looked really bad. And the biggest thing, Kadarius Toney, the receiver they took in the first round, played 5 snaps. Long live Dave Gettleman.
No, I mean, Daniel Jones is an absolute loser. Daniel Jones, the fact that there's people out there who think he's a franchise quarterback. I have a Giants fan friend who is still arguing that it's not Daniel Jones' fault. It's the O-line. It's Gettleman. It's everyone but Daniel Jones. And it's unbelievable to me. This guy just has never had it. It was ridiculous that he was drafted where he was with the pedigree that he had and his college production that he had. And he was just given the starting job and has never earned it throughout his time there. I think that was his 30th fumble that he had there in that game. And it was an important fumble at an important time, like it always seems to be with Daniel Jones. And you said Teddy Two Gloves for Teddy Bridgewater. The gambling man in me respects Teddy Bridgewater because he's such a good covers quarterback, and that's why I call him Teddy Covers. Teddy Covers. He's a great underdog quarterback for gambling, and he was a favorite in this game at New York. But the Denver Broncos, I kind of poo-pooed a lot of the playoff buzz. I'd still like to see it against a team that I don't think stinks. I think the Giants stink. But, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe all they did need was a game manager in Teddy Bridgewater because they do have a good roster. They did lose Jerry Jeudy. I don't know how long that was for, but
somehow that was a high ankle sprain instead of a broken ankle, which I couldn't believe watching the replay. So that's great news for them. Typically a high ankle sprain, I think, is somewhere in like the 3 to 6 week range. Mm-hmm. So we'll have to keep an eye on that.
He looked great too. He looked great yesterday.
Yeah. So 2 games left here. We've got Miami Dolphins at the New England Patriots, the Crimson Tide Bowl. The Dolphins defense looked really good. Tua's still got a long ways to go. I couldn't help but think as I was watching that game, this is one of the games I bet on. I took the Dolphins money line, which paid out for me, but I couldn't help but think as I watched that, Tua might not be the guy long-term in Miami. It's too early to make that call. I don't think he was as bad in year 1 as people gave him credit for, but there was not a year 2 jump that I would have liked to have seen. So what are your thoughts on Tua, and what were your thoughts on Mac Jones in his first start?
Mac Jones was good. I thought Mac Jones looked really good. He made all the throws. He looked like a bit. They went out there with a really vanilla game plan for him. They got a really garbage call at one point in that game that really allowed them to score a touchdown instead of having to kick a field goal where it was roughing the passer. Miami rolled into Mac Jones lower half, and they called roughing the passer for going at his legs, which ended up giving them a touchdown. Yeah, I thought Tua started this game off really well. It seemed like the first drive was really good. He had a couple also misdirection plays and read option plays where they had him run a little bit that I thought he looked really good in those moments. And I thought that he looked pretty good in the third quarter right after halftime. But there was a long stretch there in the second quarter, towards the end of the first quarter as well. And then obviously throwing a pick in the fourth quarter when you're trying to protect the lead. There were obviously moments where you hold your breath. I'm a Tua guy. I still think the talent's there long-term and the accuracy is there long-term. He said something, or I don't know if the coach said something. He was trying to throw that away and when he threw that pick, which is obviously one of the issues with him has always been strength and arm strength. And if you were trying to throw that away and you couldn't make it far enough to throw it away, that's a problem in that situation. So there's obviously some concerns with Tua, but I did think that there were also some signs of this. I thought it was, much of the same of last year where there was a lot of good to take away, but people are going to focus on the bad kind of.
Yeah. On the Mac Jones front, I thought he looked really good in his first start. The biggest negative thing I noticed with Mac is that whenever he had to try to put a little extra zip on the ball, getting it outside the hash or outside the numbers or into a tight window, his accuracy seemed to suffer, which is going to be something to watch. If when he needs to add a little extra to the ball, if it's going to sail on him, that's going to be a problem for him. But, overall, really encouraging start. I think Patriots fans should be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, for sure. I think both of these teams are going to compete for the division title. And I know that we have some questions with Tua, but the fact that they were able to go into New England and win that game in a game where their quarterback didn't play very well, in a game where presumably their number one receiver, Will Fuller, maybe Jalen Waddle's their number one. I'm not quite sure how they view their receivers there. Will Fuller is suspended for the first 2 games, so they get him back in 2 weeks. So I think this was a huge win in terms of playoff implications down the line in the AFC East, that the Dolphins were able to get this win on the road without playing all that well. And hopefully Tua plays better down the stretch. Hopefully that defense is able to hold up. But the Bills obviously did not look very good. The Jets are not going to be a factor, and they were able to beat the Patriots. So it's going to come down to the Bills, Dolphins, and Patriots. So that win is going to be huge down the line for tiebreaker purposes.
Yeah, absolutely. So then our last game, the Sunday night game, we've got the Chicago Bears at the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams' rushing attack really struggled in this game, which you expected with Cam Akers going down. Their lead back had 16 carries for 70 yards, not what you're looking for. But as much as their rushing attack struggled, the Bears struggled much more. Their defense was bad, and their defense is going to have to shine for this team to win, and they were just bad. And beyond that, the Bears, they just don't have an offensive line. They've got no left tackle. They drafted Tevin Jenkins. He's hurt. They signed Jason Peters, and to the surprise of absolutely no one, Jason Peters failed to make it through the game without getting injured. So they bring in Larry Borum, and then he gets hurt. So they were literally on their fourth left tackle in their week 1 game. And Eagles fans feel their pain from last year with all the offensive line woes. Not that they would have won the game with Justin Fields, but Andy Dalton, that gives them no chance whatsoever. And I honestly can't believe Matt Nagy's still insisting on playing him.
I think that I said it before, I think that they did it to avoid Justin Fields getting embarrassed against Aaron Donald and the Rams defense, and I understand it. Now, I don't understand not playing him week 2 against Cincinnati. I do think everyone is reacting to this Bears loss like they're terrible and like they're not going to win 5 games this year. I'm obviously a little bit higher on the Bears. The offensive line's downright concerning, and the injuries are downright concerning. But I think once Fields gets in, I do think that that will rejuvenate the team, and the defense will even have a little bit more belief instead of knowing that when they get off the field, Andy Dalton's going to go out there and go 3 and out every time. I think Justin Fields is going to change that team when he eventually gets in there. So for everyone pouring dirt on the Bears, just remember the Rams are really, really, really good. And I think that we saw what Matt Stafford is going to be like in that Rams offense. And we saw that, if you're Matt Stafford, you got to be loving life. He was smiling. I feel like I've never seen him smile before. Like, it's funny.
Is
like,
there anything to smile about?
Yeah. What is there to smile about in Detroit, Michigan? But it was funny to see. And it was awesome to see. I mean, I'm not like a Stafford fan or anything, but he definitely looked like every bit of what they expected when they traded for him.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, that's about going to wrap it up. We hit all the week 1 in review, obviously, except the Monday night game that's going on now. Maybe we'll talk about it briefly when we come back later this week to preview week 2. But Mark, before we get out of here, do you have any final thoughts for us?
No. You can go follow me at Mark Henry Jr. _. I went undefeated in college football gambling on Saturday. I had a pretty good day on Sunday, but I'm already hard at work in the lab. Trying to find the picks for this week, and I might have an announcement coming there this week, so stay tuned to that.
All right. Well, for my final thought, I just want to let everyone out there know that fumbling out of the end zone being a touchback is the dumbest rule in any sport ever. I mean, think about like running for the end zone and you reach for the pylon. If you fumble it out of bounds at the 1-inch line, it is your ball. But 1 inch further, you lose possession. That's just absurd. All that aside, we already touched on it. That was a horrific call. It should have been an incompletion. But NFL, please change this rule. It's absurd. It's been absurd for years. Everybody knows it. Get rid of the fumble out of the end zone being a touchback.
Also, just before we get out of here, me and Shane both went 10-5 picking winners this week. Maybe next week we'll do what our pick against the spread would be too. Maybe I'm not sure what we'll do. Since we tied this week anyway, we have freedom to do whatever we want for whatever content.
We'll be back again, like I said, later this week to preview week 2. But thank you for joining episode number 8 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, be sure you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. That really helps us out. You can follow us on Twitter at our handles at @halfandhalf_TPL, at Mark Henry Jr. _. From me, from Mark, from the Painted Lines. We'll see you guys next time.